Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jenna Burleigh. Jenna Burleigh was born on November 4, 1994 in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, the state capital. Her parents, who had a strong marriage, met while studying at the University of Pennsylvania and have been together ever since. Jenna grew up in a loving environment from a large Catholic family. She loves animals and has a strong desire to help not only her younger siblings, but also others in need, which has motivated her to participate in various volunteer activities. Jenna is a kind, cheerful, and sociable girl. In August 2013, Jenna graduated from high school and chose to attend college in Florida. She was accepted to Temple University, where she quickly became involved in campus life. Jenna joined the women's community, fighting for girls' rights. For her, this was an exciting new chapter in her life. She maintained a close relationship with her family and visited them regularly during winter holidays. Enjoying skiing in her hometown, however, at the age of 19, she had a serious accident while skiing and broke her leg. The injury required surgery to install a pin and a brace. After several surgeries, Jenna tried her best to regain her mobility, but the recovery process was difficult. Eventually, Jenna decided to return to school. Complications arose that required her to be hospitalized. This was a difficult time for Jenna, as the previously active and energetic girl lost the ability to move on her own and was confined to a wheelchair. During this time, she became closer to her friends and family. She also started writing her own blog. In 2014, she published many articles that addressed many social issues and life in a positive way. Jenna aspired to be a designer or ecologist and shared her interests on social media. By 2015, she had realized her long-held dream of creating designer jewelry. She opened a small online store and donated 20% of her earnings to charity. After her trauma, Jenna struggled with her mental health, experiencing a significant depressive episode that led to a stay in a psychiatric hospital. During this time, she wrote about her battle with depression, anxiety, and attention deficit disorder on her blog. Determined not to waste her time recovering at her parents' house, she focused on her studies and graduated from a local college in Montgomery in 2015. Throughout this time, she kept in touch with friends and slowly began to heal. In the fall of 2017, Jenna returned to Temple University to study film and communications, a field she had previously dropped out of due to trauma. However, she transferred to the Philadelphia campus, a city known for its high crime rate. The only safe places were student dorms, and walking around the city after dark was dangerous. Despite the dangers, students often ignored curfews and enjoyed their free time like normal young people. Jenna worked in a store while pursuing her design interests. Unfortunately, she faced a number of setbacks, including a car accident during her first week of school. Fortunately, she suffered only minor injuries and did not require surgery. Her father came to help her with the car after the accident, which occurred on August 30, 2017. The next day, Jenna had some early morning classes, so she decided to stay in school. That Wednesday, her roommate, Davis Train, was throwing a birthday party for a friend. The party coincided with Wild Wednesday, a college tradition that the university community celebrates every week on Wednesdays. Students usually gather at local bars after class to enjoy the evening. Since Jenna's father was visiting, he spent the evening at a restaurant with her before taking her to the party with her friends. It was Jenna's first Wild Wednesday, and she was excited to be a part of it. Jenna spent the evening with several classmates and went to several bars with them. The last place Jenna was seen that night was a sports bar, just a block away from the college campus. The small bar was packed with students. She was there with friends, including Davis. He left around midnight, but had planned to meet Jenna after she finished partying. However, she never showed up. Around 1 in the morning, as the bar was about to close, the group of drunk students began to disperse after returning home. Davis fell asleep while waiting for Jenna to call. When he woke up in the middle of the night and realized Jenna wasn't home, he began to worry. He rushed to his phone and saw several messages from Jenna, including one asking for help, which scared him. He quickly responded, but his message remained unread. Jenna did not return his calls, and since the bar was closed, he thought she might have returned to campus in a taxi. However, Jenna was still missing. He tried calling other students who had been with her that night, but most were either asleep or unaware of what had happened. From the comments of his friends, Davis realized that Jenna was in danger on the streets of Philadelphia. Concerned, he decided to contact Jenna's parents. They understood the seriousness of the situation. Jenna's father began searching for her throughout the night, but unfortunately, his efforts were in vain. Around 9 a.m., the father went to the university's campus security services to ask for help in finding his daughter, Jenna, who had just started her first semester. Unfortunately, the staff was hesitant to take his concerns seriously. They were used to students going missing after a night of partying almost every week, and most of them returned home after sleeping at friends' houses. Concerned parents were advised to wait at least a day, hoping that their daughter would return on her own. Those 24 hours were a long time for Jenna's family. The father hoped that Jenna would come home, or at least call. But his phone remained silent. The next day, he contacted university security again. Officers finally responded to his report, worried. They first reviewed the recordings from the campus surveillance cameras. They discovered that Jenna had not returned to her dorm that night. Officers began interviewing friends and acquaintances of Jenna's who had been with her at the bar. Through these conversations, they learned what she had been wearing on the night of her disappearance. It was clear that Jenna had disappeared off campus, in an area not covered by university security. As a result, the police were brought in to assist in the case. They worked together to investigate the circumstances surrounding Jenna's disappearance. A text message Jenna sent to Davis was alarming. It said she needed help, but did not provide any specific details. The police quickly realized the seriousness of the situation and that they needed to act quickly. They began tracking the geolocation data of Jenna's cell phone. The last time it was active was at a bar around 2 a.m. When Jenna sent a text message to Davis, the police went to the bar to talk to the bartender. An employee recognized Jenna from a photo the police showed him. He reported that she had been sitting at a table until closing time after her friends left. She spent most of the time alone. Looking upset, it seemed like she was waiting for someone or hoping for a response to her text. As she kept checking her phone, unfortunately, it seemed she didn't get any messages. At around 1:30 a.m., a muscular stranger approached her, whispered something in her ear, and sat down at her desk. They drank and began talking. At 2 a.m., the bar closed, the stranger left, and Jenna followed him. The man had probably offered to help her, to give her a ride to school. Jenna probably felt like she had no choice but to accept. The bartender noticed that they were both quite drunk, but neither of them were aggressive or tried to force her to do anything. The bar's surveillance footage corroborated the bartender's story. The police spoke to other employees, and one bartender recognized the man as a regular named Joshua Huppaters. He even had Joshua's phone number. With this information, the police quickly called Joshua, who was likely the last person Jenna had contact with. However, he did not answer, so they left him a voicemail about the situation. The police wanted to speak to him directly, as he could provide important information about Jenna's whereabouts and was an important witness to the investigation. The police began searching for him to ask questions, checking all nearby hospitals and locations where Jenna might be, but she was nowhere to be found. Joshua eventually called the police back after receiving their voicemail. He apologized, explaining that he had slept most of the day after a night at the bar. He claimed that he had had too much to drink. He also did not remember whether he had been drinking alone or buying drinks for others. He did not remember who he spent time with that night. When questioned about Jenna, Joshua claimed that he did not know with Jenna. He tried to convince the police that he did not know who they were referring to. The bartender later confirmed that Joshua was not drunk enough to forget what happened in the bar. Although they had consumed quite a bit of alcohol, they were still on their feet and able to move around. Making amnesia unlikely, Joshua buying drinks for Jenna suggests that he may have had an interest in her. Police discovered that he lived just a few minutes' walk from the bar. Police easily located the room he was renting, but had difficulty when Joshua would not open the door. They contacted the apartment owner, who quickly assisted the police by using her key to let them into the room Joshua was staying in. Upon entering the room, the police found Joshua's room to be quite messy, filled with all kinds of papers and documents. During the search, they found a pair of men's shoes with a drop of blood on the heel, along with a roll of toilet paper with a dark red stain that resembled blood. However, the police needed a search warrant to collect evidence for further investigation, so they had to leave the apartment and go to the police station to get the necessary warrant. Meanwhile, Joshua again did not answer the phone because the police lacked concrete evidence against him. Obtaining a warrant could take some time. Police began to suspect Joshua as the prime suspect in the case during further investigation. Police learned that Joshua was 29 years old and born on February 27, 1980. Joshua's father had been murdered in the Philadelphia suburbs, and the case remained unsolved given the circumstances. Joshua may have developed mental health issues. Family friends have mentioned that he struggled after his father's death. However, the police have more troubling suspicions about him. Joshua has a lengthy criminal record that includes drug dealing, alcohol-related offenses, theft, and drunk driving. However, there are no other incidents of violence or assault in his past. On September 1, a young man named Jack Miley contacted the police. Claiming to be a friend of Joshua, he said that, on August 30, he and Joshua had gone to a bar to meet girls. Jack left the bar at around 1 a.m. with other students and woke up at around 10 a.m. He immediately smelled a strong odor of cleaning products, which made him feel nauseous, curious about the smell. He found Joshua in the kitchen, screaming on the floor while pouring bleach. Jack noticed a deep scratch on Joshua's neck and a large cut on his arm that looked like a stab wound. Joshua explained that he fell into a thorn bush while drunk and did not remember how he injured himself. At the time, Jack had no idea where Joshua's wound had actually come from. Joshua then went to the hospital to get stitches for the cut. The two young men later met, and Joshua said he was going to North Carolina to visit relatives. This struck Jack as strange, as although he had known Joshua for a long time, he had never heard of any relatives living in another state, and this sudden trip seemed suspicious. After Joshua left, Jack learned of Jenna's disappearance. At that moment, he realized that Joshua's injuries and the blood in the house could be related to Jenna's disappearance, prompting him to go to the police due to many inconsistencies in Jack's testimony. The police began to suspect that he was involved in Jenna's disappearance. He could indeed be involved in the case because he was at the same bar as Joshua and lived with him. Jack was asked by the police to contact Joshua and find out the truth about that night. However, Joshua continued to ignore his phone calls. After a few days, Joshua's phone finally worked, and he answered. He quickly denied Jack's story, saying that he was in South Philadelphia and had not yet arrived in North Carolina. He agreed to meet the police at the station, but unfortunately, he never showed up and disappeared again. To gather more information, FBI agents joined the investigation. They monitored the general area where Joshua had spoken to the police, locating him in the mountains of northeastern Pennsylvania. This indicated that he had been dishonest about his whereabouts. All evidence pointed to him being hiding something and possibly involved in Jenna's disappearance. Joshua was eventually found at his grandmother's house, which was located near a river high in the mountains. When the police arrived to speak with Joshua, he immediately claimed that he had spoken to the police. He had spoken to the police about Jenna at the university. He then went to his grandmother's house to rest. The police knew that he was on leave and had not been to the university for a long time, which indicated that he was lying during the conversation. The police noticed a stitch on his hand and a deep scratch on his neck. As Jack had mentioned, when asked how he had been injured, Joshua said that he had been injured while breaking a cereal bowl. However, the wounds were in areas that did not match his explanation, suggesting that he was not telling the truth. The police then took Joshua and his grandmother to the police station. During the examination, the police discovered deep cuts on his hands, some of which had been stitched up. Their suspicions, combined with inconsistencies in Joshua's testimony, led them to obtain a search warrant for his room near the school. Inside, they found broken plates, including a cereal plate, but no blood on them. In other areas of Joshua's room, they found suspicious, dark red stains, especially on the kitchen sink, trash can, and kitchen knife blade. It appeared that he had tried to clean up, but failed to do so completely. In addition, the police found a black hair tie. This was just the beginning of their disturbing discoveries. They discovered a large amount of illegal drugs, suggesting that Joshua was not just a regular dealer, but a major supplier to the entire university campus. The breakthrough came when they checked a trash can and found a blood-stained sweatshirt identical to the one Jenna had worn on her last outing. Joshua was eventually arrested the same day. Police then received new information. A man contacted the police and reported that Joshua had hired him to transport a large shipment for $200 cash. The informant noticed another man helping Joshua load a heavy plastic container into the trunk of his car. During the night, they drove about 150 kilometers from the city to Joshua's grandmother's house. When they got there, the driver assisted in unloading the plastic container, which Joshua claimed contained university textbooks. This struck the driver as odd. Joshua stated that he was transporting textbooks and clothes, and that his cousin had helped transport a container. Police were then contacted by a man named George Stobo. George went into the barn to check for snakes in the corner of the barn. He discovered a plastic container, which, when opened, revealed the body of a dark-haired girl. George immediately called the police. Officers went to George's house and found Jenna's body. The body was in a terrible state, with 140 wounds that showed signs of brutal beatings. Police spoke to Joshua without revealing that they had discovered Jenna's body. He confirmed that he had moved the container to his grandmother's house, but did not admit to anything. He was nevertheless charged with murder, cruelty, and obstructing an investigation. Joshua still denies all charges against him. The medical examiner concluded that Jenna died from blunt force trauma to the head and strangulation. She had been severely beaten and repeatedly struck with a blunt object. Jenna also had a stab wound to her left hand and a deep cut to her right hand. Male bodily fluids were found on Jenna's body. Police later discovered surveillance footage that showed Jenna and Joshua entering the building, where he rented a room, at 2:32 a.m. the next day. Joshua transported her body in a plastic bin. A witness reported hearing Jenna screaming from Joshua's room. These screams of pain lasted for several minutes before suddenly stopping, but no one called for help or intervened. The question is why Jack, who lived next door, did not hear the screams. Was he an accomplice to the crime, or was he too drunk to realize what had happened? The exact truth remains unclear, as Jack claims he was drunk and did not hear anything. Regardless, there is no evidence implicating him in the murder. The trial began in 2019. At this time, forensic experts thoroughly examined Jenna's body and confirmed that there were male fluids on her body, indicating that she had been abused. However, Joshua claimed that their interaction was consensual. Joshua's lawyer insisted that Jack was the real culprit. However, Jack's sister testified, saying that her brother was completely unaware of the incident because he fell asleep after drinking, making it impossible for anyone to wake him up during the trial. Joshua changed his plea and admitted that he was involved in the desecration of the body, but he maintained his innocence of the murder. After deliberations, the jury found Joshua guilty of murder and related charges. He was sentenced to life without parole, plus an additional 18 years for concealing evidence. His lawyer quickly sought to appeal the sentence, arguing that police did not have the necessary warrant when they first searched Joshua's room. However, the appeal was rejected. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Gabrielle Uchlaki. Friendship during youth is very important. However, finding a true friend for life can be challenging. Sometimes, people may appear friendly but have hidden selfish motives or even darker intentions. It's not always easy to recognize these signs, and failing to do so can lead to serious consequences. Gabrielle lives in a cozy little town in Nevada, USA. The local economy relies heavily on the mining industry, which provides jobs and supports families. Gabrielle's family moved here from Colorado Springs. Her father Jim had planned to find work in the gold mines. The family was excited about their new life, believing that the town was perfect for them and everything seemed to be going well. Gabrielle was immediately drawn to this vibrant atmosphere. She loved the beautiful natural surroundings, horseback riding and ATV riding, while some consider these activities more suited to boys. This added to Gabrielle's appeal as an active and adventurous young woman. Gabrielle has a close bond with her brother James, who is only a year older than her. They spend a lot of time playing game. Their family, united and loving, always supports each other through difficult times. Even when their parents decided to divorce, they handled the situation calmly to protect their children from emotional distress. After the divorce, both parents maintained a friendly relationship and resolved issues related to property division and child custody without conflict. After the divorce, her mother, Alicia, moved away but chose to live nearby so they could co-parent. Both parents took turns caring for Gabrielle and James and maintained open communication, which helped ease the emotional impact of the divorce on the children. This approach allowed Gabrielle to grow into a strong and intelligent young woman. She became very independent and faced challenges without fear. From a young age, Gabrielle helped her parents with housework. By the age of 16, Gabrielle was skilled at horseback riding, herding cattle, and helping on the farm, and was admired by her family and neighbors for her diligence and professionalism. She was cheerful and easy to get along with. After finishing school, Gabrielle plans to attend college to study psychiatry and help people struggling with mental disorders. Gabrielle has always been empathetic to the pain of others, which is what led her to pursue this career path. However, in 2020, Gabrielle faced bullying at school. Her best friend noted that many of her classmates suddenly turned against her that year for no apparent reason. This friend suspected that envy and jealousy were the main causes, as many girls were jealous of Gabrielle's beauty and intelligence and targeted her for bullying. Eventually, Gabrielle had to switch schools, but she remained optimistic. She had a small group of close friends who truly loved and supported her. Gabrielle started to spend more time on horse racing, where she met others who shared her interests. One of them was Bryce Dickey, who was a couple of years older than her. They quickly became friends, and Gabrielle often referred to him as an older brother. However, it seemed that Bryce wanted something more than friendship. He spent a lot of time with her, and she got along well with his family. Bryce was known to be a kind and polite young man who, like Gabrielle, was always willing to help those in need. Gabrielle and Bryce became close friends because of their similar personalities. They made plans to meet up, as they often did. That day, Gabrielle was at her father's house, where he was practicing with his rock band. She was eager to spend time with her father. She was chatting happily with the band members and even invited Bryce to watch. Unfortunately, Bryce missed practice. Bryce then plans to pick Gabrielle up by car to his house to watch a movie and promises to drop her off later. When her father Jim got home around 7:30 p.m., he discovered that Gabrielle was not home. He searched the house, calling her name, but received no response. Worried, Jim tried calling her, but her phone was turned off. This was unusual, as Gabrielle was usually responsible. She was never late, and it seemed unlikely that she would forget to come home on time. The worried father called Gabrielle's brother James, but he also had no idea where she was. Jim then called Bryce to ask about his daughter. Bryce told Jim that after driving around the city for a few hours, Bryce dropped Gabrielle off near the school, where she met a guy he didn't recognize. Bryce then left to avoid interrupting their conversation. Jim asked Bryce again why they didn't go to the movie as planned. Bryce explained that he and Gabrielle had simply changed plans and decided to drive along country roads. Naturally, Jim was anxious to know who Gabrielle had met, but Bryce couldn't provide any details. He described the man as a tall, blond young man with the appearance of a cowboy. Jim was surprised by Bryce's words. He didn't understand who this stranger was or why Bryce would leave Gabrielle with a stranger instead of taking her home as planned. Bryce had always made sure to take care of Gabrielle, so this behavior seemed unusual. Bryce was very worried about what had happened. He felt guilty for not taking Gabrielle home, explaining that she had asked him to leave. Bryce now realized that the situation could be serious and that something might have happened to her. He remembered that the stranger was driving an old RD F-150 pickup truck. This only added to the family's worries, as none of her friends owned such a vehicle. Gabrielle's family tried calling her hundreds of times, but each call went straight to voicemail. Concerned, her parents decided to contact the police. However, as usual, the police assumed that Gabrielle had probably just run away or gone out with friends and would return soon. However, her parents knew that this was not normal for Gabrielle. She had very few friends and none of them knew where she was. Gabrielle had no family problems, addictions, or mental health concerns, and there had been no recent conflicts. To her family, her sudden disappearance was a clear indication that something serious had happened. The sheriff realized the seriousness of the situation. He gathered all the information available from Gabrielle's friends and acquaintances. The police then contacted Bryce to request a meeting near the school where Gabrielle had gone missing, to provide details about what happened after he dropped her off. Bryce said that he had spent the day with Gabrielle and that they had been driving around the Spring Creek area in his car. However, during their outing, his father called unexpectedly and asked him to come home immediately to help with some errands. Understanding the situation, Gabrielle agreed to reschedule their trip for the next day, but she asked to be dropped off near the school. She also mentioned that she wanted to meet her new friend, Jetty. Bryce reported that after Gabrielle exited his car, she walked directly towards a green pickup truck where a white man in a cowboy hat was sitting. He observed her but then drove off, unsure if she entered a stranger's vehicle. The Bryce had a poor recollection of the details and did not note the pickup truck's license plate. During the conversation, the police found no reason to suspect Bryce. He seemed innocent, so they decided to release him and continue investigating other clues. The police wanted to draw public attention to the case using the media, believing that someone might have seen the man in the cowboy hat and driving the green pickup truck. Initially, the police focused on identifying the license plate number. Additionally, the sheriff contacted the phone service provider to determine the last known location of Gabrielle's cell phone. They discovered that her phone had been active near the school where Bryce had dropped her off. As a result, the police rushed to that location in hopes of finding new evidence, but they found nothing suspicious there. Gabrielle's family and friends continued to search the streets, hoping to find any clues to her whereabouts in the city and surrounding areas. They distributed and posted more than 500 flyers, but local residents remained unresponsive and there were no new leads for the investigation. It felt as if Gabrielle had disappeared without a trace. Meanwhile, Gabrielle's mother Alicia created a social media group to share updates and information about the search, but the effort yielded no results. Then, out of the blue, she received a text message from an unknown number. The sender claimed to have kidnapped Gabrielle and demanded a $25 ransom, threatening to harm her if Alicia did not pay. After some time, the kidnappers sent another text message, saying that Gabrielle was sick and would die without the medicine. The kidnapper insisted that he would only provide the medicine if he received the money he demanded. Initially, the parents agreed to the kidnappers' demands, but they decided to contact the police first. Alicia called the police to report the situation. They quickly asked her to come to the station so they could trace the phone number. It seemed that the investigation had turned up an important lead. While police were trying to track down the phone number used by the kidnapper, one of the search team leaders contacted the police. He informed them that volunteers were searching about 20 kilometers from the city when they discovered a puddle of what appeared to be dried blood on the side of the road. The search team got out of their vehicles and began searching the area, where they eventually discovered a blue tarp in the bushes. Underneath, they found the body of a girl lying face down, her clothes matching Gabrielle's description. One of the police officers entered the office and announced that the interview with Alicia would have to be postponed because they had to go to the scene where the body was discovered. Alicia began to cry, and upon arriving at the scene she identified Gabrielle. Forensic experts determined that Gabrielle had been raped, as her pants and underwear were pulled down to her ankles. She had been strangled and her throat had been slit. Which was the cause of death? Police found Gabrielle's headphones tangled in a nearby tree branch. They also found a used condom and its packaging near her body. This provided a clue to the investigation. Police wanted to learn more about Jetty, Gabrielle's new acquaintance, but no one could provide specific details about him. Finding this individual became a top priority. Gabrielle's family received significant support from social networks, with Bryce being particularly notable. He maintained close contact with Gabrielle's mother, father, and brother, offering help and expressing his sorrow. He described Gabrielle as a bright person and a close friend he would never forget. Meanwhile, the police began their investigation by obtaining warrants to search the Gabrielle's computer and mobile phone. They also needed to analyze the evidence they had collected, including DNA found on a condom, which was crucial for solving the case. It was suspected that Gabrielle might have been targeted by an internet predator with a history of sexual violence. The police quickly created and reviewed a list of registered sex offenders in the area who might have been connected to the incident. To identify the criminal, all the information needed to be compared. However, this process took a long time, causing the investigation to drag on. Meanwhile, the police quickly checked the information from the kidnapper. They were able to trace the phone number that called the Alicia to demand a ransom. Unfortunately, this number was not registered in Nevada. It was a hidden number bought online, making it impossible to track. The police first wanted to identify Jetty, who was considered the prime suspect in the case. After obtaining information from Gabrielle's phone, the police quickly located him. However, they were disappointed to discover that Jetty was in Alaska at the time of Gabrielle's death. Although they had met shortly before the incident and had planned to meet again, he was not the one who raped and murdered her. He had an alibi. He had not left Alaska during that time. The police decided to investigate all other people with similar initials, driving similar cars, and living in the city, surrounding areas, and near where the body was found. They were only able to identify two young men driving a green pickup truck, but both had alibis, as they were far away at the time of the murder. This stalled the investigation. The police then contacted Gabrielle's family again, hoping to get new information. Alicia said that in the weeks before her death, Gabrielle had been dating a guy who was pursuing a cowboy lifestyle, living on a ranch and competing in rodeos. They quickly broke up because Gabrielle wasn't ready for intimacy. After the breakup, they remained friends, but during some nasty arguments, he made extreme comments about wanting her dead. After verifying his alibi, it seems the investigation has stalled once again. However, the police took one last approach to identifying the suspect. They decided to review all the city's surveillance camera footage, specifically looking for a green pickup truck driven by a cowboy. Fortunately, there were several high-quality cameras along the route Gabrielle took before her death and captured clear images. Police had to analyze multiple videos that had been recorded. Despite their efforts, they were unable to find the green pickup truck that Bryce had mentioned. However, police did find something interesting. The blue Chevy pickup that Bryce himself drove really was on the recording. He did not stop or let anyone out, which suggests that he lied about the green pickup truck. The police then decided to trace the route the blue pickup took. Bryce had previously claimed he had been driving around the area with his girlfriend for several hours, but this was proven false by the video evidence. The police decided to request data from Bryce's cell phone to compare his geographic location with that of the assault victim. They quickly obtained a warrant to access this data and did not notify him to avoid alerting a new suspect. It was clear that he had been with Gabrielle all day because their movements matched until her cell phone turned off. Additionally, he was present at the location where Gabrielle's body was discovered before returning home. This indicated that Bryce was present at the crime scene and may have committed or witnessed the crime. To verify the assumption, an examination was conducted. The Bryce was immediately asked to undergo tests and provide DNA samples. He agreed. He was later released, but the police did not reveal their suspicions. Instead, they acted as if everything was normal and collected samples from everyone in the area. Skin particles were found under Gabrielle's fingernails, and these samples matched Bryce's DNA. It was clear that he had sex with Gabrielle, but everything happened involuntarily. Bryce was called in for questioning again. Bryce agreed to be questioned without hesitation, remaining calm and confident. The police asked him if he had ever had a relationship with Gabrielle, especially sexual. He denied these allegations, claiming that he considered her like a younger sister. Bryce's statements raised suspicion because if he was telling the truth, his DNA would not have been present at the crime scene. However, police discovered a condom containing his semen at the scene of the murder. Feeling that the police were onto something, Bryce changed his story, claiming that Gabrielle had flirted with him and that they had consensual oral sex while using a condom. Bryce later stuck to his story about a man in a green pickup truck, repeatedly claiming that he could not provide a clear description of the cowboy or the truck's license plate. However, multiple traces of Bryce's DNA were found under Gabrielle's fingernails, in her private parts, and even on her neck, near the fatal stab wound. Additionally, based on Bryce's movements and the surveillance camera footage, it was confirmed that he did not stop anywhere else. This indicated that he was lying. Under pressure from the police, Bryce eventually confessed that what happened to Gabrielle was an accident. He mentioned that she wanted to have rough sex with a knife, and in a moment of passion, the blade accidentally stabbed her. This explanation seems very unlikely, especially given his history of dishonesty. Bryce Dickey, 18, was arrested on March 19, 2020. Following his arrest, police searched his home and vehicle. At Bryce's home, police discovered several bloody items in his closet, including a knife that was determined to be the murder weapon. In the trunk of his car, they found a bloody sweatshirt with Gabrielle's blood on it, along with multiple fingerprints and DNA samples linking Bryce to the crime. When Gabrielle's family received the news, they were completely stunned. Her family had always considered Bryce a good young man, and he had treated them like family, considering him Gabrielle's best friend. The family had trusted Bryce as if he were their own, not knowing that he would betray them in such a terrible way. While the townspeople saw him as the true cowboy and a good person who would help others in times of need, he was actually hiding his true nature. Gabrielle's family trusted him. He made sure she got home safely and gave her regular rides, which seemed thoughtful. However, his intentions were not noble. He was actually trying to get close to his victim. In May 2022, the prosecution presented several credible testimonies, including testimony from Bryce's ex-girlfriend. She described him as aggressive and cruel, often getting into arguments. She recounted that he had choked her at least 4 times during their conflicts, with the last incident being so severe that she felt she was on the verge of death. She ended her relationship with Bryce, who had been stalking and threatening her for a long time. It was only when her parents threatened to call the police that he stopped. The jury then deliberated for about an hour and unanimously found Bryce Dickey guilty of first-degree murder and rape. The judge sentenced Bryce Dickey to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after serving 20 years. He received an additional 20 years for using a deadly weapon, another 20 years for kidnapping, and 10 more years for rape. In total, he will serve 70 years before he can seek release. Bryce did not explain his motive for the crime. However, a friend of Gabrielle's revealed that just days before the murder, Bryce confessed his love to her, but she suggested they remain friends. Police believed that Bryce could not handle the rejection and felt resentful. When he learned that Gabrielle was seeing a new boyfriend named Jetty, he became angry and sought revenge. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Sydney Luff. Sydney Irene Luff was born on August 21, 1993, in Broken Bow, Nebraska. She grew up in Arcadia with her parents, George and Susie Luff. In 2000, when she was in 2nd grade, her family moved to Norfolk. Her mother, Susie, worked as a special education teacher, and her father, George, was a school principal. Sydney was an active child and enjoyed a happy childhood filled with a love of nature. She loved fishing, an activity her father often took her to do. During her school years, she participated in basketball and golf, and showed outstanding potential in both sports. However, she developed scoliosis, which affected the curvature of her spine and forced her to give up many of her favorite hobbies and sports. In 2011, after finishing high school, Sydney began working at a Menards store that focused on home improvement products. The Luff family was very attached, and when Sydney needed to move from Norfolk to Lincoln for her job, they all made an effort to stay in touch nearly every day and often gathered for dinner. Although Sydney lived on her own, she frequently returned to her parents' house. Recently, however, she had been dealing with depression and felt that her medications were not helping, but rather worsening her condition. Susie, concerned for her daughter, recommended a new doctor who prescribed different medications for her. During phone calls with her mom, Sydney expressed that she was starting to feel normal again, sounding quite optimistic. She was trying to make positive changes in her life and was searching for a new job. Working in a store wasn't her ultimate goal. She felt there was more out there for her. However, she was uncertain about her career path and what she truly wanted, which contributed to her feelings of depression. In November 2017, Sydney's mental health worsened, leading her to start taking antidepressants and occasionally smoke marijuana. Although her family and friends were very supportive, but she was looking for more than just companionship. She wanted love. Being young and modern, Sydney was interested in women, so she often searched for dates on social media. She used Tinder, an app that helps people connect for dating, to find friends and romantic interests. During that month, she matched with a girl named Audrey, who responded to her message. They began chatting and discovered they shared many interests, including gambling, hiking, and enjoying good food. After exchanging about 100 messages, Sydney and Audrey decided to meet in person on November 14th. Sydney traveled to Audrey's house in Wilbur, and their first meeting was a success, leaving Sydney very happy. They enjoyed each other's company and agreed to meet again at Audrey's house on November 15th. After finishing her shift at the store, Sydney went home to get ready. She cleaned up, styled her hair, and did her makeup before heading out. She took a selfie and posted it on Tinder with the caption, "Ready for date." Shortly after posting, she received a message from Audrey, who was waiting for her in the car. The following day, Sydney failed to arrive at work. Her family, who had noticed her recent happiness due to a new friend, became worried. When her co-workers reported her absence, they were surprised, as this behavior was uncharacteristic of their responsible daughter. Susie mentioned that Sydney had been struggling with anxiety and severe depression. Just days before she went missing, Sydney had spoken with her family about her worsening mental health, and they had recommended that she see a doctor to resume her antidepressant medication. That was the last time her family saw her. Sydney's parents visited her apartment and were shocked to find that Sydney had left her beloved cat, Mimsy, without food or water. This was very unusual for Sydney, as they knew how much she cared for her cat and never left it alone for long periods. Worried for her well-being, they reported Sydney missing to the police. The apartment was locked, and when the police conducted a welfare check, they found nothing unusual. However, the family insisted that something was wrong, and the police took their concerns seriously. On November 16, 2017, a 5 feet 7 inches blonde named Sydney was reported missing after not showing up for her shift at the Menards store located at 27th Street and Cornhusker Highway. She had a spinal condition that affected her walking, making her easily recognizable. When she went missing, she was wearing a white Columbia jacket and a cream-colored shirt. Her parents told the police that earlier that week, on Wednesday morning, Sydney had shared on Snapchat that she had gone on a date with a woman she met online the previous Tuesday night and planned to see her again that Wednesday evening. Sydney's car was found in Northeast Lincoln, and the police are interviewing people and searching for any clues about her or her location. Her family has been handing out flyers suggesting she may have been abducted 40 miles southwest of Lincoln, where her cell phone last connected. The flyers also mentioned that there has been no activity in her bank account and that her phone was turned off the night she went missing. The flyers included a description of Sydney and highlighted her notable features, such as several tattoos, one on her arm that says, "Everything will be great someday," yin yang symbol beneath her elbow, and the word "believe" on her wrist. Anyone who has information about Sydney's location is encouraged to contact the police by phone. A massive search for Sydney was launched. Billboards were placed on freeways with her picture. A manhunt was also broadcast on television news. Sydney's mother, Susie, continued to assert that something had happened to her daughter after that date. To support her this thing, she shared a screenshot of a Snapchat post from Sydney that included her picture and the caption, "Ready for date." Sydney's friends also confirmed that she was going on a date with a woman named Audrey, whom she had met through Tinder. During the investigation, police examined Sydney's phone records and surveillance footage from her workplace. They quickly identified a person of interest. The last time Sydney's phone was used, it connected to a cell tower in the Wilbur neighborhood, likely close to Audrey's home. However, the police did not know who Audrey was. They started looking for a woman named Audrey, the last individual to see Sydney alive, but they faced challenges in locating her because no one knew her real name. Sydney's friend Brooklyn stepped in to help the police by searching for Audrey on Tinder. After downloading the app, she located Audrey and they exchanged phone numbers. This led the police to discover that Audrey's real name was 26-year-old Bailey Boswell. They also found out that Bailey lived near the cell tower where Sydney's phone was last connected. Additionally, it was revealed that Bailey shared her apartment with her partner, 52-year-old Aubrey Trail. Bailey and Aubrey are two individuals with contrasting backgrounds. Bailey Boswell was raised in a typical family in Lyons, Iowa. As a child, She was sociable and performed well academically, also finding success in basketball and running. However, after the death of her father, her life took a different turn. Following her high school graduation, Bailey fell into a troubling lifestyle that involved alcohol and drugs. It was during this time that she met Aubrey on a dating website. Aubrey Trail had a problematic history, facing several fraud charges, including writing bad checks and theft. He established a cult where he referred to himself as Vampire Daddy and paid women $200 a week to adhere to his strange rules. When Sydney disappeared, Aubrey and Bailey were court-ordered to pay over $40,000 due to their fraud cases, and they had multiple misdemeanors. Despite this, the couple was able to evade the authorities. On November 19, 2017, after a warrant was issued, police conducted a search of Bailey in Aubrey's home. During the search, they found that some walls had been scrubbed with bleach. A neighbor confirmed this, stating they had noticed a strong smell of bleach 2 days earlier. After that, the police made more efforts to find the suspects. While evading capture, Bailey and Aubrey posted videos on Facebook denying any involvement in Sydney's disappearance and expressing their hope for her safe return. Bailey mentioned that she had gone on 2 dates with Sydney but had dropped her off at a friend's house, after which she never heard from Sydney again. Bailey added that she just wanted Sydney's family to know that she was really sorry, but she had nothing to do with it. She hoped that Sydney would be found very soon, as Sydney was a lovely, amazing girl. After several days, the police tracked down Bailey Boswell and Aubrey Trail at a hotel in Branson, Missouri. They were arrested weeks after Sydney was reported missing. Through a detailed analysis of phone records and Bailey's location history, investigators found Sydney's remains, which had been dismembered into 14 pieces. 13 of these body parts were discovered in black plastic garbage bags in ditches in Clay County, with some of her part, such as her heart, missing. The situation was horrific. In total, 16 crime scenes were connected to Sydney's remains or her personal belongings, including her car keys, driver's license, and phone case, which were found along the highway. These locations were consistent with the suspects' movements, Bailey and Aubrey. Forensic experts performed autopsies on the 13 body parts that were found. They found abrasions on Sydney's wrists, a bump on her head, torn earlobes, and various bruises, contusions on her back. These injuries suggested that Sydney had struggled to defend herself. The tragic finding devastated not only Sydney's family and friends but also the entire community of Nebraska. On December 11, 2017, the Luff family held a private funeral for Sydney at her lifelong Lutheran church. Bailey and Aubrey faced charges of first-degree murder, improper disposal of human remains, and conspiracy to commit a felony. Bailey pleaded not guilty to all charges, while Aubrey pleaded not guilty to felony murder and conspiracy but admitted guilt regarding the improper disposal of human remains. Aubrey's testimonies were inconsistent. Each time he spoke, he appeared increasingly confused, altering his statements and introducing new elements and characters into the story. After his arrest, Aubrey spoke to the police about the cult that he and Bailey belonged to. He discussed witchcraft and claimed that he was a vampire capable of flying. Aubrey presented himself as the cult leader and insisted that there were witches in the group who needed to kill another woman to gain powers. During one of Aubrey's early court hearings, he confessed to killing Sydney but insisted it was an accident. Aubrey explained that he paid Sydney $5,000 to fulfill a fantasy with 2 other women. Sydney agreed to this, but she tragically died during the encounter when he accidentally strangled her with a cord. Aubrey admitted to dismembering the body Sydney as part of a ritual tied to his religious beliefs. He said he needed to drain her blood to free her soul for the gods in a sacred location and arranged her body parts to aid in her reincarnation. However, this account was proven to be false. Surveillance footage from November 14th captured Bailey and Aubrey checking into a hotel in Lincoln, close to Sydney's residence. The following day, November 15th, they went to a home improvement store, where they were seen purchasing a disturbing selection of tools: a hacksaw, bleach, a folding saw, a utility knife, and bags intended for Sydney's remains. On November 15th at 12:01 p.m., a surveillance camera recorded Sydney and Aubrey crossing paths at the Menards store during business hours. At that moment, Sydney did not know who Aubrey was or how their lives would become intertwined in a tragic way. On June 11, 2018, the first court hearing took place regarding the murder and improper burial of Sydney's remains. The court ordered separate trials for the defendants, Bailey and Aubrey, although the charges against them were essentially the same. The trials were held in Lexington because the attorneys argued that Bailey and Aubrey would not receive a fair trial in Wilbur due to the extensive media coverage of the case. The prosecution argued that Sydney was murdered through strangulation in a premeditated attack. Aubrey and Bailey were identified as the leaders of a group that recruited young women into intimate activities. To find these women, Bailey used Tinder. During the trial, the jury heard from 3 other women who had previously been in relationships with Aubrey and Bailey, and they shared that they also met these men on Tinder. All of these women had been involved with Bailey and had engaged in intimate activities with both Bailey and Aubrey. One woman testified that she traveled with Aubrey and was given a weekly allowance of $200. She claimed he invited her to join his cult, which he referred to as involving witches. To join, he told her she would need to torture and kill someone. She also mentioned that Bailey was called the Witch Queen. Another woman added that Bailey often talked about breaking her fingers and expressed a desire to dismember bodies. All 3 women emphasized that both Bailey and Aubrey actively participated in these discussions about torture and criminal acts. It is surprising that in today's world, some people still believe in the terrifying concept of exorcism and try to persuade others of its validity. The prosecution reviewed the investigation and the evidence gathered to piece together what happened on the tragic evening of November 15, 2017. Sydney was preparing for a date with a woman she had recently met through Tinder. Bailey picked Sydney up from her apartment, and they started driving in Bailey's car. Eventually, they arrived at Bailey's house, where Sydney was drawn into the apartment. As soon as she entered, Bailey and Aubrey attacked her and strangled her with an extension cord on the living room floor. Bailey and Aubrey then cleaned the apartment thoroughly, an action the prosecution claimed was planned in advance. They subsequently dismembered Sydney and disposed of her remains in Clay County. The next day, on November 16th, the court heard from their landlord, Jenna Burleigh. She testified that when she drove into the garage, she noticed a strong smell of chlorine, which became more intense when she entered the house. The medical examiner concluded that Sydney's death was a homicide caused by asphyxiation. Toxicology reports revealed that Sydney had antidepressants in her system. The court discovered that, in addition to the missing parts, Sydney's upper left arm, specifically the section above the elbow and below the shoulder, was also unaccounted for. Prosecutors have recommended the death penalty for the 2 suspects. They have also said they will review the case if the verdict is deemed unfair. Meanwhile, Aubrey again denied any involvement in occult activities and only admitted to improperly burying the remains. During his trial, he exclaimed that Bailey was not involved in Sydney's death, shouting, "Bailey is innocent, damn you all." Then, he attempted to end his life by slashing his throat 3 times with a razor blade. However, he survived and was placed in custody until he fully recovered. Aubrey did not attend court for several weeks after that. The next time he appeared was during the defense phase, specifically when he was scheduled to testify. When he entered the courtroom, he smirked and told the judge, "He will be good." It's uncommon for defendants to testify in their own trials, as defense attorneys often advise against it. This is because testifying can lead to complications during cross-examination. Some defendants may reveal too much information, struggle to answer questions clearly, or become confrontational with attorneys, which can negatively influence jurors. However, in Aubrey's case, his situation was different since he had many interactions with the police following his arrest. Aubrey had initially shared his account of incident with the police, but during the trial, he wanted to change his story. He chose to skip most of the trial and only attended the final hearing, where his noticeable scars were evident. When he testified in his defense, Aubrey shocked his attorneys by admitting that he had previously lied to both the authorities and his legal team regarding the death of Sydney. In his testimony, he confessed that he met Sydney in March 2017 and paid her to take part in his illegal activities because she was in need of money. He claimed they lost contact, but in November 2017, he reached out to Sydney again. She needed money, and Aubrey explained that this was the reason he was at Menards that day. On November 15th, Aubrey offered to pay Sydney $55,000 to she join his antiques gang. Later that night, Aubrey, Bailey, and Sydney became intimate, but unfortunately, Sydney accidentally choked to death due to an extension cord used during their activities. Aubrey stated that he didn't know if Sydney had a seizure or something. But that was when she stopped breathing. In court, he clarified that there was no ritual involved in dismembering Sydney's body and that claims about witches, vampires, and blood-sucking were false. Aubrey admitted that he had only dismembered Sydney because he couldn't fit her body in the car. Aubrey stated that he panicked and discarded Sydney's body in a field in Clay County at dawn on November 16th. When questioned about why he didn't seek help if Sydney's death was accidental, he claimed that no one would believe him. Aubrey confessed to disposing of Sydney's body but insisted that her death was accidental, occurring while they were playing with an extension cord. During Bailey's trial, she did not admit to any wrongdoing. In fact, her lawyers argued that she was also a victim of Aubrey. Her attorney told the court that when she met Aubrey, she was a vulnerable young woman, living alone and working as a waitress in Princeton, Missouri. The defense claimed that Bailey was not involved in Sydney's death or the handling of her remains. But this turned out to be untrue. Bailey's cell phone, which she used to access her Tinder account, was located near where Sydney's body parts were discovered. Through a thorough examination of Bailey's phone and location data, police were able to locate all of Sydney's remains. The court also found out that Bailey was the one who reached out to Sydney and set up a meeting. Bailey drove to Sydney's to pick her up on the evening of November 15th. The prosecution informed the court that Bailey found pleasure in discussing cruelty and enjoyed conversations about torture with Aubrey. Evidence presented during the trial indicated that a crime had been planned. On the day of Sydney's murder, Aubrey and Bailey were together at a store where they purchased tools such as a hacksaw, scissors, and a box cutter from Home Depot. Around noon that day, Bailey sent Sydney a text asking how her day was going. Phone records and surveillance footage confirmed that Bailey was in the Menards parking lot with Aubrey when she sent this message on Tinder. Despite working at Menards, but it seems that Sydney did not realize Bailey was there. A few hours later, Bailey sent Sydney a message on Tinder, said that her was at her apartment and would pick Sydney up soon. However, phone records reveal that instead of going on a date, they went to the apartment where Bailey and Aubrey lived. Bailey's attorney, Todd Lancaster, argued that the evidence indicated Bailey had bought bleach in garbage bags for the purpose of disposing of Sydney's body. This could result in charges of aiding and abetting the improper disposal of human remains. On November 8, 2021, Bailey Boswell was sentenced to life in prison. The Love family has been searching for justice for 3 years, grieving the loss of their beloved daughter, Sydney. They hoped for a judgment that would bring them some peace. On July 11, 2019, a jury took less than 3 hours to find Aubrey Trail guilty of planning a murder and improperly disposing of human remains. The three judges described his actions as cold and calculated. In the second part of the trial, which determined his punishment, the county prosecutors fulfilled their commitment and secured the death penalty for Aubrey Trail. Consequently, he was executed by lethal injection on June 9, 2021. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Nicole Loeb. On August 19, 2014, at 5 p.m., the Portland Emergency Services received a distress call from a man reporting a woman stabbed in the chest at the Timber Creek Apartments. The victim, who was still alive but struggling to breathe, needed immediate medical attention. The eyewitness requested an ambulance be sent to the scene as soon as possible. When paramedics arrived, they found the victim. Despite the paramedics' best efforts, she succumbed to her injuries. Before passing away, she shared crucial information. The man who made the 911 call explained that he and his wife were walking down the stairs towards the parking lot when they heard a scream. He looked to his right and saw a woman running towards them, crying out, "He stabbed me! He stabbed me!" The victim told them that she didn't know her attacker, but described him as wearing camouflage pants and a black hoodie. The manager of the Timber Creek Apartments identified the victim as 29-year-old Nicole Loeb, a leasing consultant who had been working at the complex for a few weeks. On August 19th, Nicole was driving a golf cart to deliver lease renewal letters to residents, along with a balloon and a popcorn package. She marked each apartment on a map as she made the deliveries. The investigation revealed that the attack likely occurred in a specific stairwell at Timber Creek, known as Breezeway. This conclusion was based on Nicole's notations and the map she had marked. It is believed that the attacker was waiting for her under the stairs, as several indicators pointed to this location, including a trail of blood drops and scattered leaflets at the foot of the stairs. During the investigation, several witnesses reported seeing a suspicious young male wearing a black hoodie and cam pants in the area around the time of the attack. By combining the reports and timelines of each sighting, detectives were able to piece together the path the suspect took into and out of Timber Creek. The Washington County Search and Rescue Team searched the woods along Cedar Mill Creek, which runs through the Timber Creek apartment complex. They found several items during their search and sent them to a laboratory to see if they were relevant to the case. The police contacted Chris Loeb, Nicole's husband, to inform him of the incident. Chris and Nicole had a blended family, including 2 daughters from his previous relationships and a son together. Nicole was a strong and resilient person who had overcome cancer as a teenager. She developed a passion for fitness and bodybuilding and competed in several events. Her dream was to become a coach and help others achieve their fitness goals. The attack on Nicole was not a robbery, and Tinoco did not attempt to remove any of her clothing. This suggests that the motive behind the attack may have been personal. As a result, detectives began to focus their attention on her husband, Chris. Nicole was a beautiful woman, a loving wife, an amazing mother, and a devoted friend. She was unafraid to share her faith and opinions with others, and her goal was to make the world a better place. Her legacy lives on, and it's clear that she achieved her goal. She touched the lives of everyone in the room in ways that will have a lasting impact. The police interviewed residents of the Timber Creek Apartments and found 2 witnesses who saw a man in a black hoodie and cam pants matching the suspect's description running across the road during the time of the attack. The witnesses saw the man running towards the houses across the street from the Timber Creek Apartments, not looking around, and with a hood over his head. Using the witnesses' descriptions, detectives created a sketch of the suspect and quickly distributed it throughout the city. A sketch of the suspect was shown on TV. Detectives also worked with informants, gathering several potential leads, including one from a man whose son knew someone named Taylor. According to the man who reported Taylor, he had been threatening people with a knife in recent weeks. The police located Taylor and brought him in for questioning. During the questioning, investigators found his statements unusual and suspected he might be suffering from a mental illness. When asked about Nicole Laub, he openly admitted to taking her life. However, Taylor's confession was inconsistent, repeating information from the news and inventing unrelated details. As a result, police excluded him from their list of suspects. Another potential lead emerged involving a man named Nick, who had a history of crime. Nick had some physical characteristics similar to the suspect in the sketch, but his past behavior didn't suggest he was capable of a crime like the one committed against Nicole. Despite having a history of run-ins with the law, Nick had never been known to physically harm anyone. When police brought Nick in for questioning, he denied any involvement in the crime and requested a lawyer. The police then obtained a search warrant for Nick's home, where they found a black hoodie and camouflage pants. However, the hoodie didn't match the witness's description because it had a prominent white logo on the front. The police sent the clothes to a lab for further analysis, but experts found no evidence linking them to the crime. The police obtained Nick's mobile phone records, which provided conclusive evidence that he was not at the crime scene when Nicole was attacked. This eliminated Nick as a suspect, leaving the investigation at a dead end. 3 weeks after Nicole's death, on September 13, 2014, the Eugene Police Department received a call came from Eugene, the second largest city in Oregon. On the night of the 13th, Heather Miller, a 39-year-old woman, was attacked as she was leaving a bar near Autzen Stadium after watching a game. Tinoco, identified as Jamie Tinoco, was publicly named by the police, who released his photo in the hopes that other victims would come forward. Detectives investigating the death of Nicole Laub noticed a resemblance between Tinoco's photo and their suspect sketch. Further investigation revealed that Tinoco lived with his parents in an apartment directly across from the Timber Creek apartment complex where Laub had died. This geographical proximity strengthened the suspicion that Tinoco might be responsible for her death. Detectives questioned Tinoco about his potential involvement in Laub's death, hoping he would confess, just as he had done in a separate case involving Heather Miller. However, Tinoco denied any involvement in Laub's death and refused to cooperate. As a result, the police had to gather evidence to link Tinoco to the crime. With his parents' apartment located directly across from the Timber Creek complex, the police obtained a search warrant. During the search, they found a black hoodie and cam pants in Tinoco's room, which they sent to the lab for analysis. The lab report results with no DNA match found. While there's no concrete evidence linking Tinoco to Nicole's death, he's clearly responsible for attacking Heather Miller and showed no remorse, even taking pride in his actions during his trial. In a new interrogation, investigators used Tinoco's ego to their advantage, suggesting that if he confessed to Nicole Laub's murder, he would gain respect from other inmates in prison. The detective implied that owning up to the crime would make him appear more formidable, rather than just a coward who attacked a woman from behind. After a brief silence, Tinoco began to open up about Nicole. He claimed that he didn't intend to kill her, but rather wanted to experience the feeling of stabbing someone. According to Tinoco, his goal was to hurt Nicole, not take her life. He described how he had seen Nicole parking a golf cart and carrying a balloon in a small package to an apartment on the second floor of Timber Creek, which is located near his apartment. Nicole was attacked when she went upstairs and then came back down. Tinoco hid behind a golf cart, then ran to the stairs and stabbed Nicole when she descended. He chose Nicole because she seemed like an easy target. When questioned about his intentions, he admitted that he had considered forcing Nicole into a sexual act, just as he had done with Heather Miller. However, he claimed that he didn't follow through with this plan because Nicole screamed loudly after being stabbed, prompting him to flee the scene. During a reenactment of the crime, Tinoco demonstrated how he escaped from the scene. Chris Laub, Nicole's husband, was shocked to learn that the person responsible for his wife's death was only 17 years old. As a father of a 13-year-old daughter, Laube found it incomprehensible that someone just 4 years older than his daughter could commit such a heinous crime. The trial started in 2015. Tinoco confessed to the crime during the interrogation, but he claimed he was innocent in court. His lawyer argued that there was no DNA evidence linking Tinoco to the crime scene. The lawyer asked for mercy for Tinoco, who was 17 years old and severely mentally ill, and hoped that treatment could help him change his behavior. The defense presented only one witness, a psychologist who evaluated Tinoco and found that he exhibited symptoms of schizophrenia. However, another psychologist from the Oregon State Hospital disagreed, saying that Tinoco had a personality disorder, not schizophrenia. The jury was convinced of Tinoco's guilt after watching a video of his confession and an experiment where he recreated his actions at the time of the crime. Jamie Tinoco provided details during a reenactment of Nicole Laube's crime that only the perpetrator would know. This led to a guilty verdict on all counts in 2017. The jury was tasked with deciding Tinoco's sentence, choosing between life without parole or life with the possibility of parole after 30 years. However, they found insufficient mitigating circumstances to warrant the option of parole, resulting in a sentence of life without parole. Before the official sentencing, Circuit Judge Kirsten Thompson allowed Tinoco to speak. With his attorneys by his side, Tinoco apologized and asked for forgiveness. Chris Laube, Nicole's husband, recalled that Tinoco's family approached them after the sentencing to offer condolences and apologize. However, in 2021, the Oregon Court of Appeals overturned Tinoco's conviction, citing changes in juvenile laws. At the time of the crime, Tinoco was automatically referred to adult court due to the nature of the offense. New reforms now allow for offenders between 15 and 17 years old to be tried in juvenile court, rather than being automatically referred to adult court. A new law requires prosecutors to request a hearing to decide if a juvenile's serious crime case should be moved to adult court. This change affects the overturned conviction of Tinoco in the Nicole Laube case. Although Tinoco remains in prison, his defense may try to reduce his sentence if he's retried and reconvicted. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Lauren Burke. Lauren Ashley Burke was born on December 30th, 1989 in Marietta, Georgia, to James Burke and Vivian Gershon, who later divorced. She had two siblings, Jacqueline and Chad Burke. After high school, Lauren attended Auburn University, where she studied graphic design and was an active member of the Delta Gamma sorority. She also played lacrosse and was involved in various campus activities. Her friends described her as a friendly, excellent student who was always smiling, happy, and helpful. Lauren started dating Sean McQuaid while still in high school, and they continued their relationship when they both enrolled at Auburn University. At that time, education was their top priority, but they still made plans for their future together. Tragically, on March 4, 2008, she began the day by having breakfast with Sean at a cafe at 11 a.m. She then attended class and called her father, James, to discuss plans for spring break and a dentist appointment. After finishing her conversation with her father, Lauren visited her friend Sean in his dorm room, where she stayed until the evening. At 8:30 p.m., she had a planned study session with her classmate Michael at the library. When Lauren left Sean's room around 8 p.m., it was already dark outside. She got into her car, a black 2001 Honda Civic, which was parked in the lot next to the dorm. This was the last time Sean saw her. Michael waited for Lauren at the library, but she didn't show up. He started calling her cell phone, but she didn't answer. He kept calling and eventually got through to her. Lauren told him she had forgotten about their appointment and hung up. About an hour later, at 9 p.m., a 911 call was made, reporting an injured girl lying on the roadside near the Farmville Baptist Church and Route 280 on the 147 freeway. Lauren was lying in the middle of the road, taking slow, deep breaths because she was suffocating. She had many injuries on her body and was only wearing socks on her feet. The traffic in both directions was blocked because drivers had stopped their cars in the roadway to help her. At 9:12 p.m., the police arrived, but Lauren was already unconscious. A few minutes later, paramedics came and found that Lauren's pulse was very weak as they loaded her into the ambulance. She was taken to East Alabama Medical Center at 9:35 p.m., where doctors started trying to save her life. Around the same time, at 9:27 p.m., multiple people called 911 to report a car on fire on the Auburn University campus. Firefighters and police were sent to the scene, but they couldn't find the owner of the burning car among the students who had come out of their dorms to see the fire. When the police checked the license plate, they found out that the car belonged to James Burke, a resident of Georgia. But what they didn't know was that James Burke is Lauren's father. The police called James and learned that the burned-out Honda actually belonged to his daughter Lauren, who is a student at Auburn University. James was frantic to know what was happening with his daughter, but the police couldn't give him any information. They didn't know where Lauren was and claimed no one was in the burned-out car. James tried calling Lauren's cell phone, but she didn't answer, which only made him more anxious. Desperate for news, James reached out to his daughter's friends, but none of them knew anything about her whereabouts or the car fire. He then contacted his ex-wife, Vivian, Lauren's mother, hoping she might know something, but she was also in the dark. Vivian called Lauren's boyfriend, Sean, at 9:40 p.m. to inform him that Lauren was missing and her car had been burned. Sean started making calls to their mutual friends to see if anyone had seen Lauren that evening. He discovered that she had canceled a library meeting, claiming she had forgotten about it. Sean was certain that Lauren hadn't forgotten her evening appointment because she had told him she was heading to the library when she left his room 2 hours earlier. Meanwhile, Lauren's family and friends were searching for her, unaware of the desperate situation unfolding at East Alabama Medical Center, where doctors were fighting to save her life. Lauren was brought to the hospital unconscious and without identification, so the doctors didn't know who she was. Despite their best efforts, they were unable to save her, and she was pronounced dead about an hour after admission. The autopsy revealed that she had died from a single bullet wound that had punctured both lungs. The shot had been fired from very close range, with the gun muzzle just inches from her skin. As police investigated the burned-out car on campus, whose owner was missing, they quickly pieced together the evidence and realized that the hospital's unidentified victim was Lauren Burke. On March 5, 2008, James Burke identified his daughter Lauren's body after traveling from Atlanta. The news of her death quickly spread throughout the Auburn University campus. As Lauren's loved ones mourned her loss, the police worked to uncover the circumstances surrounding her death, including the connection between her murder and the car fire. They also sought to determine whether other students were at risk. Investigators processed both the scene where Lauren's body was found and the area around her car for evidence. Auburn Police Captain Tom Stauffer stated that the department has dedicated all available resources to finding the person responsible for the crime, as the tight-knit student community of Auburn, Alabama, takes such incidents very seriously. The police are deeply invested in solving the case and will not rest until the perpetrator is caught. To aid in the investigation, Alabama Governor Bob Riley has offered a $10,000 reward for any information leading to an arrest. The burned-out car belonging to Lauren Burks was brought to the Auburn Police Department, where state forensic laboratory investigators and state fire chief's office officers examined the charred remains. Their search uncovered burned clothing fragments, a melted digital camera, and the car's owner's manual. A significant discovery was a .38 caliber bullet found under the front seat, suggesting that the car's interior may have been the crime scene and that the perpetrator had set the fire to destroy evidence. Investigations involved interviews with Lauren's family, friends, and boyfriend, but none could identify a suspect who had a motive to harm her. Prior to her death, Lauren had been at Sean's dorm, so detectives searched his room but found nothing linking him to the crime. After talking to Michael, the person Lauren was supposed to meet at the library, detectives discovered that when Lauren answered his call, he heard a sound similar to a moving car in the background. This new information led them to investigate further, and they found that Lauren's bank card had been used multiple times shortly after she was found lying in the road. It seemed likely that the person using Lauren's bank card was involved in her incident, so the police started searching for them. However, the case took an unexpected turn soon after. Just 2 days after Lauren's death, on March 7, 2008, at 9:55 a.m., a similar attack occurred at a Walmart parking lot in Newnan, Georgia, about 75 miles from Auburn. A 72-year-old woman was assaulted by a man of African descent as she was getting into her car. The attacker hit her on the head, threatened her, and forced her to move to the passenger seat. He then got into the driver's seat and tried to drive away, but realized an eyewitness was following him and calling for help. The perpetrator, fearing the police would be called, returned to the Walmart parking lot where they had initially been spotted. They abandoned the stolen vehicle, got into a nearby silver Chrysler Sebring, and sped away. Several hours later, 4 officers began a high-speed chase to catch the fleeing Chrysler as it headed towards Columbus, West Georgia. The driver of the Chrysler refused to stop, putting other drivers at risk during the pursuit. Officers observed the driver throwing an object out of the window, which was later found to be a .38 caliber revolver. The chase continued until the Chrysler broke down, billowing smoke from under the hood. The driver stopped abruptly in the middle of the road and opened the door. A pursuing police officer on a motorcycle crashed into the open door, causing the officer to fly over the handlebars and fall to the ground. Fortunately, the officer was not seriously injured. The perpetrator then attempted to flee into the nearby woods, but was quickly caught by the police and taken into custody. Courtney Lockhart was born on October 20, 1984. According to his family, he was a pleasant and fun-loving person before enlisting in the U.S. Army. However, after serving in Iraq from 2004 to 2005, he returned as a changed person. His mother described Courtney as a cheerful individual, but after his return from Iraq, his behavior drastically changed. He stopped smiling, became paranoid about people standing behind him, and would often hide in closets or under the bed. In 2006, Lockhart's personal life took a toll when he had a daughter with his ex-girlfriend. The same year, he was court-martialed for assaulting fellow soldiers, using illegal substances, and abandoning his unit without permission. As a result, he spent 7 months in detention before being dishonorably discharged from the Army in December 2006. In the following years, Lockhart's life spiraled out of control. By 2008, he had become increasingly troubled, neglecting his personal hygiene, abandoning his responsibilities as a father, and developing a severe addiction to illegal substances. Between February 2008 and the time of his capture, Lockhart committed a series of burglaries using a consistent modus operandi. Courtney Lockhart targeted women, approaching them from behind in parking lots as they got into their cars. He would threaten them with a gun, demand their purses, and try to take their cars. Tragically, one of these crimes ended in the death of Lauren Burke. Lockhart's string of assaults came to an end on March 7, 2008, when he attacked a 72-year-old woman but failed to escape a police pursuit. After his arrest, Lockhart, then 23, confessed to the police that he was responsible for kidnapping and killing Lauren Burke. The police interrogation, which was recorded on video, became a crucial piece of evidence in the trial. Additionally, the police found Lauren's personal belongings, including her iPod and bank cards, in Lockhart's car. Lockhart provided a detailed account of the events leading up to Lauren's death. On Tuesday, March 4, 2008, he woke up in his silver Chrysler Sebring, which he had been sleeping in near the East Alabama Medical Center. Desperate for money, he drove around Auburn looking for another victim to target. It's notable that Lockhart exclusively targeted women, never men. He eventually ended up on the campus of Auburn University, where he parked near the student dorms and spent several hours watching students from his car. At 8 p.m., Lockhart saw a girl, who turned out to be Lauren, casually walk up to the car parked next to him and open the door. Without hesitation, Lockhart grabbed his revolver and approached Lauren from behind. He poked her with the gun muzzle and demanded to know how much money she had. When she didn't respond, he forced her into the front passenger seat and got behind the wheel himself. Lauren was initially silent, but then screamed in fear. Once she calmed down, she handed Lockhart $200 from her purse, begging him to leave. However, instead of leaving, Lockhart threatened her with a gun, ordering her to remove her clothes. Lauren complied, leaving on only a pair of socks. Lockhart's motivation for making her undress was his mistaken belief that she would be less likely to try to escape without clothes. Lockhart then drove around Auburn, holding Lauren at gunpoint with one hand while steering with the other. Lauren attempted to talk him out of his criminal actions, and when he claimed his life was over, she promised to help him find a job in an effort to de-escalate the situation. Meanwhile, her phone started ringing, and Lockhart instructed her to answer it and make up an excuse to avoid arousing suspicion. Lauren was supposed to meet Michael at the library, but when he called to confirm, she claimed to have forgotten and quickly hung up. Later, Lockhart drove her through the city streets as she persistently begged him to release her, offering to help him overcome his personal struggles. As they drove down Highway 147, Lauren made a desperate attempt to escape by opening the car door and trying to jump out while the vehicle was still moving. In the ensuing chaos, Lockhart admitted to accidentally firing a shot, which tragically pierced both of Lauren's lungs, and she also sustained injuries from the fall. Lauren regained enough strength to wave at passing drivers, but soon lost consciousness. Lockhart, who had abducted her, parked his car outside a church and watched as people began to stop and assist Lauren. Realizing the police would soon arrive, he hastily left the scene, planning to destroy evidence he had left in his car. Lockhart drove to a gas station, where he used Lauren's bank card to buy a can of gasoline. He then doused the interior of his car with the gasoline, got back in, and drove to the campus where he had initially taken Lauren. His Chrysler was parked there. As he drove, Lockhart became lightheaded from the gasoline fumes, so he rolled down the windows to let in some fresh air. Once he arrived on campus, Lockhart stole $46, an iPod, and Lauren's bank cards from her car. He then set the car on fire and drove away in his Chrysler. At a gas station, Lockhart filled up his tank using Lauren's money, then returned to campus. However, investigators began to question Lockhart's story, suspecting that he had ulterior motives for making Lauren undress. They thought that Lockhart's goal was not to prevent her from escaping, but rather to exploit her in some way. When Lauren jumped out of the moving car, Lockhart's true intentions were foiled. The investigators were skeptical about Lockhart's claim that he accidentally shot Lauren. Given his military background and experience with guns, it seemed unlikely that he would accidentally discharge his weapon. Instead, it appeared that Lauren realized she was in grave danger and decided to escape by jumping out of the car, at which point Lockhart intentionally shot her. Forensic tests confirmed that the bullet found in Lauren's car was fired from the same gun Lockhart had abandoned during a police chase. Expert analysis also ruled out the possibility of an accidental shot, as the trigger required significant force to fire. On March 9th, investigators questioned Lockhart for the second time. The next day, he was officially charged with multiple crimes related to Lauren Burke's case. The trial started on November 8th, 2010. Lockhart's lawyers argued that their client suffered from a mental illness due to his military service, and that Lauren's shooting was accidental. According to court records, Lockhart pleaded not guilty, citing mental defect or insanity as the reason. Lauren was initially silent, but then screamed in fear. Once she calmed down, she handed Lockhart $200 from her purse, begging him to leave. However, instead of leaving, Lockhart threatened her with a gun, ordering her to remove her clothes. Lauren complied, leaving on only a pair of socks. Lockhart's motivation for making her undress was his mistaken belief that she would be less likely to try to escape without clothes. Lockhart then drove around Auburn, holding Lauren at gunpoint with one hand while steering with the other. Lauren attempted to talk him out of his criminal actions, and when he claimed his life was over, she promised to help him find a job in an effort to de-escalate the situation. Meanwhile, her phone started ringing, and Lockhart instructed her to answer it and make up an excuse to avoid arousing suspicion. Lauren was supposed to meet Michael at the library, but when he called to confirm, she claimed to have forgotten and quickly hung up. Later, Lockhart drove her through the city streets as she persistently begged him to release her, offering to help him overcome his personal struggles. As they drove down Highway 147, Lauren made a desperate attempt to escape by opening the car door and trying to jump out while the vehicle was still moving. In the ensuing chaos, Lockhart admitted to accidentally firing a shot, which tragically pierced both of Lauren's lungs, and she also sustained injuries from the fall. Lauren regained enough strength to wave at passing drivers, but soon lost consciousness. Lockhart, who had abducted her, parked his car outside a church and watched as people began to stop and assist Lauren. Realizing the Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jake Wagner. Hannah Mae Roden, 13, met 18-year-old Edward Jake Wagner, and they became inseparable after he invited her to prom. While their love was palpable, their significant age difference raised concerns. Despite this, their parents did not intervene in their relationship. As time passed, the Roden and Wagner families grew close, often spending weekends and attending parties together. The young couple's love was carefree and passionate. When Hannah turned 15, she revealed her pregnancy, which thrilled Jake. He expected his family to be delighted with the news, as they valued tradition and family lineage. The Wagners saw the baby as a way to continue their family name, which was passed down through generations. In contrast, the Rodens had a more modest approach to family, but still prioritized their children. Hannah's parents, Christopher and Dana, remained devoted to their 3 kids despite their divorce. The Roden family's income was modest, unlike the Wagners. To celebrate Sophie's birthday, a grand party was organized shortly after. Jake proposed that Hannah move in with him and his family, claiming it would make life easier for both of them. However, Hannah refused, having come to realize that Jake was trying to control her and limit her independence. This was partly due to Jake's increasing aggression and suspicious behavior, which had already led to physical altercations on several occasions. Hannah's rejection sparked tension between the Wagners, with each of Sophie's parents determined to gain full custody of Sophie. Driven by their own interests, the families began to advocate for their own rights. Jake's anger towards Hannah peaked when she refused to sign a document granting him and his brother full custody. He even threatened her, accusing her of hiding secrets. The situation escalated when Hannah announced her second pregnancy. Although she claimed the child was fathered by another man, Jake was skeptical. In December 2015, he hacked into Hannah's social media accounts to uncover evidence of infidelity, but found none. Instead, he discovered her communication with Georgia Ford's former mother-in-law, which sparked his interest. A court case was soon to follow as a result. During a court hearing to decide where their granddaughter Sophie would live, Christopher Roden and George Wagner III got into a serious argument. This dispute marked the beginning of the end for the relationship between the two families. The Wagner family soon became convinced that Hannah, Sophie's mother, was an obstacle and that they needed to eliminate her and the entire Roden family who could potentially gain custody of Sophie. This disturbing idea evolved into a sinister plan by Christmas 2016. While many people were celebrating the festive season with love and kindness, the Wagners held a chilling family vote to decide whether to carry out their plan. Every family member agreed to go ahead, and they began assigning roles and making preparations. Over the next 5 months, they secretly observed the Roden homes, studying their daily routines, work schedules, and surveillance cameras. On the night of April 21, 2016, George Wagner III visited Christopher Roden under the guise of offering him a job to improve his finances. This was just a ruse to get into the house. The next evening, around 8 p.m., Christopher Roden Sr. answered the door, unaware of the danger lurking. Earlier that day, Bobby Jo Manley, Dana Roden's sister, had stopped by Christopher's trailer to care for the family's animals, as she did daily since he had offered her a job. However, she noticed someone was inside, which was unusual at that time of day. Alarmed, she called emergency services, reporting what she saw and requesting help at 477 Union Hill Road. Panicked, Bobby rushed to the neighboring homes of relatives, loudly knocking on their doors. At one of the homes, she found a 3-year-old boy, Clarence's son, who didn't respond to her questions about his parents' whereabouts, only pointing towards the bed. Following the incident, the surviving children were placed in the care of relatives. The neighborhood was gripped by fear, and the police advised the Roden relatives to take precautions and warned all Pike residents to stay indoors at night. After a brutal mass murder shocked the state, the public demanded a swift and transparent investigation, urging authorities to catch the perpetrators as soon as possible. In response, businessman Jeff Ruby offered a $25,000 reward for information leading to the arrest and conviction of those responsible. However, he later withdrew the offer. An investigative task force of at least 100 individuals was formed to work on the case. Following the funerals, investigators took possession of the slain family's 3 trailers and several vehicles, transporting them to a secure facility to preserve evidence and protect the victims' belongings. The plan was to return the family's cars and farming equipment to their relatives after the investigation. Forensic experts joined the inquiry, meticulously examining the trailers, but no suspect DNA was found. Although cameras had been installed in the mobile homes, they had been disabled, leaving no useful footage. The perpetrators had clearly planned every detail carefully. Just when it seemed like there were no significant leads, detectives made a breakthrough discovery. Cannabis crops were found at 3 crime scenes. In one location, police found around 200 cannabis plants, leading them to suspect the drugs were being grown for sale, not personal use. This raised questions about potential involvement with Mexican drug traffickers, but the amount of cannabis found was too small to imply involvement with an entire cartel. A relative of the Roden family was arrested for drug trafficking in January 2017, but this was considered a coincidence. Leonard Manley, the father of Dana Roden, denied his daughter's involvement in the cannabis operation, saying that they were trying to drag Dana through the mud, and he didn't like it. Some family members confirmed that Christopher and Kenneth Roden, the older brothers, grew marijuana, but they were unaware of any large-scale operation. The theory that a family feud over illegally obtained money was behind the murders was also disproven. At the Rodens' property, authorities discovered not only banned substances, but also specialized equipment used for breeding fighting chickens and cages containing animals trained for combat. Although these findings initially led investigators to suspect illegal animal fights might be connected to the homicide, it soon became apparent that this was not the case. Despite months of investigation, the true motive behind the crime remained a mystery. By April 13, 2017, local authorities officially announced that they lacked sufficient evidence to make any arrests. However, prosecutor Rob Young insisted that the investigation was still active, implying that they had some promising leads that they were not yet ready to reveal. As the second anniversary of the mass crime approached, the case received little attention from the local media, and neither the sheriff nor the prosecutor attended the memorial service, leading the community to suspect that the investigation had stalled. On May 12, 2017, a surprising turn of events occurred when a SWAT team raided a home in Pike County, just 10 miles from the scene of the crime. Initially, they were looking for suspects, but it was later revealed that their true intention was to gather evidence. Additionally, detectives searched a house in Adams County that had previously belonged to Jake Wagner, although he had already sold it by that time. Approximately a month later, on June 20, 2017, the focus of the investigation officially shifted towards the Wagner family. 26-year-old Jake, 27-year-old George III, 47-year-old George IV, and 48-year-old Angela, who lived 15 miles from the victims, were under scrutiny. The Wagners had moved to Alaska, citing difficulties staying in the area, claiming to have loved the Roden family and stating their deaths caused them immense suffering. Rob Young's words from a year earlier proved true, as the investigation had made a breakthrough and was now seeking information from the public on the Wagners' discussions about firearms, ammunition, vehicles, etc. 2 years prior, it wasn't long before the suspects, running low on funds, returned to Ohio, where detectives had gathered enough evidence for arrests, including proving Jake had hacked into Hannah's account during the examination of the Wagner family's devices. Search queries related to guardianship were discovered. It was also found that Angela had purchased sneakers for the entire family just a few weeks before the crime. The tread pattern of one of these matched that found in one of the trailers. Officers believed Angela was the mastermind behind the horrific scheme, with Jake as the primary executive. According to the investigation, each family member was involved in the criminal act. On November 13, 2018, the Attorney General announced the arrest of the Wagner couple, as well as their sons, who were charged with planning and carrying out the termination of life. Rita Newcomb, Angela's 65-year-old mother, and Frida Wagner, George III's mother, were arrested and charged with perjury and obstructing justice. In 2019, Rita Newcomb underwent handwriting analysis, which proved her involvement in forging a document related to Sophie's guardianship. She struck a plea deal to avoid imprisonment. The charges against Frida Wagner were later dropped in June 2019. The other Wagners refused to cooperate with the investigation and denied any involvement in the Rodens' deaths, expressing sorrow and wishing for the real perpetrators to be caught. However, in April 2021, 5 years after the incident, Jake Wagner decided to make a deal with the prosecution. Under the agreement, he would provide details of the crime in exchange for life sentences for all family members instead of the death penalty. Jake Wagner Jr. admitted to killing 5 people and pleaded guilty to 23 criminal charges, including aggravated murder, burglary, conspiracy, and other crimes. To ensure his daughter Hannah wouldn't be taken away, he thought killing her mother was the only solution. He believed that if he didn't also kill the Rodens, they would seek revenge and fight for custody of Hannah. Angela, who had been involved in the conspiracy, pleaded guilty to several charges on September 10th, including conspiracy, robbery, and evidence tampering. In exchange for her cooperation, the charge of murder was dropped. She received a 30-year prison sentence. George Wagner IV went on trial on August 28, 2022. Despite denying any involvement in the crimes, claiming he was unaware of what was happening, the prosecution presented evidence of his role in planning, executing, and covering up the crimes. He was found guilty on 22 counts and sentenced to life in prison without parole. George Wagner III's trial is set for February 2024. Despite his family members being convicted, he still maintains his innocence, but likely faces the same fate as his son. The once peaceful relationship between the Wagners and Rodens ended in tragedy, driven by a collective and incomprehensible madness. The consequences of their actions left 3 children without parents. As Sophie grows up, She will one day realize what happened, and it's hard to imagine how she will cope with that knowledge. The Wagners' bitter custody battle had a devastating impact on her, denying her the love and support of her parents, relatives, and a stable upbringing. Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Luz Maria Lopez. Luz Maria Lopez was born on March 17, 1995, in San Cristobal Verapaz, a small town, to a modest family of A. Morales and Brian Lopez. She was the youngest of two children, with an older brother named Omar. In infancy, Luz Maria faced a life-threatening intestinal obstruction that required a complex operation. Despite the doctor's uncertainty, her mother's prayers and faith in her recovery paid off, and the surgery was successful. Fortunately, the early surgery did not affect her development. During her school years, Luz Maria was an active and well-rounded student. She participated in gymnastics, athletics, and classical dance, and was a people person who easily made friends. She also excelled academically, particularly in the humanities. After graduation, Luz Maria decided to pursue higher education at a prestigious state university, where she chose to study law and later specialized in criminalistics, a field that had always fascinated her. When Luz Maria was a student, she accompanied her mother to a car dealership in Coban, the capital of Alta Verapaz, to buy a motorcycle as a 25th birthday gift for her older brother. They met a polite and attentive young consultant named Jorge, who showed them various models and offered recommendations. Although Luz Maria and her mother chose a model, they decided to think it over and consult with the rest of the family before making a decision. Before leaving, Luz Maria gave Jorge her phone number in case they needed further feedback. Shortly after, Jorge called Luz Maria, but instead of discussing the potential purchase, their conversation turned personal. He continued to call her several times before mustering the courage to invite her to a coffee shop. It was clear that he was smitten with the beautiful brunette, but didn't know how to initiate their acquaintance. Luz Maria was immediately drawn to a handsome young man, and when he asked to meet, she agreed. The only potential obstacle was that he was a year younger, but that didn't deter them. A romantic relationship quickly blossomed, and they both felt an intense connection, believing they had found true love. After just a few months, they decided to take the next step and start living together. Despite their parents' disapproval, they pressed on and got married 6 months later. They kept the wedding intimate, inviting only close friends and family. However, the celebration was almost ruined on the wedding day when the banquet venue encountered an unexpected issue. The couple had to pay a significant amount of extra money to salvage the event, but they were eventually able to go ahead with the ceremony as planned. Jorge is a mysterious figure, and there is limited information available about him in the public domain. What is known is that he was born in 1996 in the town of Santa Catalina Latina, Guatemala. Jorge grew up with his brother Pablo in a low-income family, where financial struggles were a constant reality. As a result, the brothers had to make do with the basics and didn't have the luxury of nice clothes or expensive toys. Contrary to what one might expect, Jorge didn't have big aspirations or ambitions. He never made an effort to study or find a good job, and instead, he took things as they came. Those who knew Jorge described him as introverted, uncommunicative, and sometimes aggressive. He struggled with controlling his emotions, which made it difficult for him to form meaningful relationships or connect with the opposite sex. Despite these challenges, Jorge was determined to win the heart of Luz Maria, the love of his life. He went all out to impress her, and once she agreed to marry him, he was in a hurry to seal the deal, fearing she might change her mind. Luz Maria's parents, however, were not convinced about Jorge from the start. They had reservations about their son-in-law, although they couldn't quite put their finger on what bothered them. Despite their misgivings, they couldn't persuade their daughter to reconsider her decision to marry Jorge. After the wedding, the young couple's marriage quickly became unhappy. The wife, Luz Maria, got pregnant, but she couldn't find a good job because she didn't have a university degree and was inexperienced. No employer wanted to hire an expectant mother with no skills, so she had to settle for casual labor. Meanwhile, her husband, Jorge, lost his job and showed no enthusiasm for finding a new one. When their daughter, Alice, was born, the family's financial situation became dire. Both Jorge and Luz Maria were unemployed and struggling to make ends meet. They couldn't even afford to pay rent, buy food, or purchase basic household necessities. Jorge convinced Luz Maria that they had no choice but to move in with his parents temporarily. Luz Maria was initially hesitant, but with a baby to care for and no other options, she eventually agreed. Her mother, was aware of the family's problems and encouraged Luz Maria to return to her childhood home, but Luz Maria insisted that things would improve with Jorge, and there was no need to worry. Luz Maria's mother visited her daughter and granddaughter at her son-in-law's parents' house, but was met with a disturbing scene. Luz Maria was in a terrible condition, malnourished from only eating once a day. This was partly due to her in-laws not providing her with sufficient food, as they saw her as unemployed. The situation was even more concerning because Luz Maria was breastfeeding her baby, Alice, so her malnutrition could also harm the child's health. The lack of food was just one of the many problems Luz Maria faced in her in-laws' home. She was constantly humiliated and even physically abused by her husband's younger brother. He was irritated by the baby's crying and the presence of children's belongings in the house. He would lash out at Luz Maria, throwing her child's things at her, and on one occasion, even threw a baby bottle at her, hitting Alice, who was in her mother's arms. Jorge refused to stand up for his wife and daughter, treating them as if they were strangers. His mother-in-law, convinced her daughter to take her granddaughter and move back to her parents' house. However, Jorge soon showed up, asking his wife to return and promising to get a job. She agreed, but only if their children could rent an apartment and live separately from his parents. After Luz Maria defended her diploma, she achieved her long-held dream. She landed a job at the city prosecutor's office, earning the respect of her colleagues with her intelligence, talent, and responsibility. As she advanced in her career, the family's financial situation significantly improved, eventually allowing them to afford a car. This improvement was entirely due to the wife's hard work, frugality, and strong reputation among her superiors. Jorge was a selfish and lazy person who relied on his wife, Luz Maria's income instead of working. He had a bad temper, was abusive, and controlled every aspect of Luz Maria's life. He wouldn't let her have friends, go out with colleagues, or even leave the house without him. He constantly checked her phone and social media, and even forbade her from using them. Jorge's behavior was extremely abusive, and he never stood up for Luz Maria when his relatives humiliated or physically abused her. He also used physical violence against her, treating her like his property. Despite this, Luz Maria repeatedly tried to leave him, but he would beg for forgiveness, and she would give him another chance. On December 15, 2020, after a violent fight, Luz Maria left Jorge and went to her mother's house with their 3-year-old daughter Alice. However, Jorge showed up, promising to change and claiming he had found a new job. Luz Maria believed him again and returned to their apartment. In mid-January 2021, Luz Maria called her mother, complaining about Jorge's broken promises and theft, which had left them in a desperate situation. However, Luz Maria stopped responding to calls and messages, which was unusual behavior for her. Her mother grew concerned and went to her workplace, only to find out that Luz Maria was missing. The police were informed, and a nationwide search effort began, with Jorge as the prime suspect. He denied any involvement, claiming he was also searching for his wife. However, the investigation revealed that Jorge was the last person to see Luz Maria alive, and he was the only suspect in her disappearance. Jorge was outraged and frustrated to be the prime suspect in his wife's disappearance, particularly since his own alibi was inconsistent and unclear. He struggled to explain why he hadn't reported her missing to the police on the day she vanished. If he thought she was at her mother's house, why didn't he call or visit her while the police were searching the area and looking for witnesses? On January 22nd, municipal workers made a gruesome discovery while responding to a call about a clogged storm drain. They found a large plastic bag containing a charred human body. Forensic experts confirmed that the body was that of a young woman. Her parents and brother identified the body as Luz Maria Lopez, despite its severe disfigurement. The body was discovered near the prosecutor's office where Luz Maria worked. Although the area lacked surveillance cameras and lighting, pathologists were able to determine that she had suffered severe beating and died from asphyxia. The evidence included internal hemorrhages, fractures sustained while she was alive, and caked blood particles in her nose and mouth. The investigation revealed that Luz Maria's husband, Jorge, was the prime suspect. A disturbing audio recording, sent anonymously by a neighbor, captured a brutal argument between the couple. The recording revealed Luz Maria's desperate screams and cries for help, as well as faint sobs in the background. Unfortunately, the neighbor who made the recording did not call the police or check on the source of the screams. Luz Maria's mother believes that if the neighbor had acted immediately, her daughter might still be alive. The recording was included in the case files, and Luz Maria's mother gave a powerful interview urging citizens to report incidents of domestic violence to the police rather than simply recording or filming them. Thousands of people protested across the country, demanding justice for Luz Maria. Although Jorge was arrested, he maintained his innocence, claiming he drove his wife to work on the day she vanished. However, security footage showed their car heading towards her workplace, but the tinted windows made it impossible to determine how many people were inside. At the couple's rented home, investigators found washed-out blood traces and drag marks, indicating that the brutal crime likely occurred there. This suspicion was strengthened by the discovery of microscopic fragments of burnt flesh in the trunk of the family car. A recent purchase by the couple, a double orthopedic mattress, caught the investigators' attention. Specifically, it was the dense polyethylene wrapping around the mattress that was significant. Comparative analysis revealed that Jorge had used this wrapping to conceal his wife's burnt remains. Several neighbors reported hearing Jorge threaten and insult his wife just days before her sudden disappearance. They recalled him shouting that he would kill her if she left him, and that he would hide her body where no one could find it. Based on the evidence collected by expert criminologists and witness testimonies, the investigation has reconstructed the horrific events of the crime. On the night of January 19, 2021, Jorge committed the murder, just one day after he and his wife had a violent argument. Jorge had a history of uncontrolled outbursts of anger, but this time he completely lost control. He brutally beat his wife, causing her to scream for help. The neighbors heard her cries but failed to call the police. During the beating, Jorge broke his wife's nose and inflicted a severe head injury. Afterwards, he strangled her with his bare hands and attempted to dispose of the body. To do so, he dragged her into the backyard, poured campfire liquid on her, and set her on fire. However, the intense smoke and smell of burning flesh and hair caught him off guard. The most disturbing aspect of the crime is that Jorge committed these atrocities in front of their 3.5-year-old daughter. Although she may not have fully understood what was happening, she witnessed the beating and murder, which was evident from her cries and screams that were recorded. Jorge, who had a basic understanding of forensic science from his wife's textbooks at home, attempted to cover up the crime and create an alibi. He deliberately chose a dark and secluded area without surveillance cameras to dispose of his wife Maria's body in a drainage sewer, escaping detection. The following morning, Jorge drove to Maria's workplace via their usual route, pretending to have dropped her off as he normally did every morning. Then, he began fabricating a search for his wife, contacting her co-workers, friends, and family. During the trial, Jorge's lawyers employed stall tactics to delay proceedings and discredit the investigation. They argued that all evidence and witness testimony was indirect and that there was no concrete proof to conclusively establish Jorge's guilt. Defense attorneys requested that Jorge's detention be changed to house arrest, citing his deep depression over being accused of killing the woman he loved and the mother of his child. However, crucial evidence came from Maria's phone, which had been in Jorge's possession since the crime. On the first day after the murder, Jorge used Maria's phone to send messages to various people, trying to create the illusion that she was still alive. Analysis of the phone's movements showed it was constantly in the same locations as Jorge's phone. The defense argued that Jorge had found his wife's phone and was driving around the city to search for her, but this claim was weakened by the fact that he had sent messages from her phone and even called it from his own phone. Further evidence of Jorge's guilt included the bruises and scratches on his body, documented by experts in photos, which suggested that the victim had put up a struggle. A notable scratch on his neck was particularly telling. While it was not possible to find Jorge's skin cells under the victim's fingernails due to the fire, the cumulative evidence pointed to his guilt. The prosecutor sought the maximum punishment for the defendant despite several contentious issues in the case. However, the court proceedings were frequently delayed. In October 2022, the defendant was finally convicted of brutally murdering his wife. He received a 50-year prison sentence, still maintaining his innocence. Custody of their young daughter, Alice, was awarded to her maternal grandparent.